Hello and welcome back to my channel Direct from Doctor. So this is Dr. Shanai and I'll be talking about a very common disorder or disease called as diabetes. So diabetes usually interests everybody, and these days a lot of people are suffering from diabetes of all the age groups, even the small children sometimes. So it has become quite an important kind of a disorder which everybody ought to know all about. So I'll be describing as usual in my own terms and in very simple terms how you can understand diabetes. And diabetes, according to most of the people, it's a very dreadful disease and all that, which is not actually. So diabetes can be easily controlled and it can be easily managed, but we should know that you have got diabetes or not. That's very important. Once you come to know about diabetes, the doctor will take care. It's easy to manage diabetes most of the times. There is something else called as uncontrolled diabetes. We'll talk about it later. So today I'll explain, and in this particular episode I'll be dividing. Actually, now I'll not be telling everything in this today's video. In today's video, I'll be explaining how one gets diabetes, how one acquires diabetes. See, diabetes is usually it's divided as two types: type 1 and type 2. Type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Nowadays, almost everybody knows about this. But what causes type 1 diabetes and what causes type 2 diabetes? To understand that, we should understand what is insulin and how insulin can be managed and what is the role of insulin in the management of diabetes, or rather in the management of carbohydrates and sugar. If it's not managed well, one can get diabetes. So here I'll be talking about insulin in this particular episode, part 1 of the episode of diabetes. So insulin is a chemical or a hormone. It's a hormone secreted by pancreas. Pancreas is a little behind the stomach. So pancreas is an endocrine organ, and its main job is to secrete what is called as insulin. Insulin is secreted in certain areas of pancreas, certain cells of pancreas. We call them as islets of Langerhans. Islets of Langerhans. So if you don't want to remember that, forget it. It's produced in pancreas. Suppose pancreas stops producing, or it doesn't produce insulin at all, or if the insulin produced by pancreas is less than what is required, a person can get diabetes. Means insulin is essentially a hormone or a chemical which is required to process sugar or glucose. In better terms, we call it as glucose. Glucose is produced when a person eats carbohydrates mainly. It's converted into glucose and also sugary substances, and this glucose has to be utilized in the body. Glucose is a necessary thing to a certain extent, and this glucose has to be utilized. It just can't go on circulating in the blood, then it will be harmful. What harm it causes, I'll tell later. So the glucose has to reach all the cells, and excess glucose has to be stored in the liver. So insulin actually does this job. Insulin sends the signals, or it activates, it promotes the absorption of sugar into the cells, various cells everywhere, all over the body. All the cells need glucose, particularly the brain. Brain requires glucose because glucose is the only kind of nutrition for the brain. So all the cells, if there is insulin, the sugar, glucose is well utilized and it goes into the cells. This insulin signals the cells to take up the sugar, and it also signals the liver in case there is excess glucose in the body. If there is excess glucose in the blood, it is stored in the liver and also in certain muscle fibers. So, and it will be released by the muscle fibers or by the liver whenever it's required. When the person is hypoglycemic, when the person falls short of sugar or falls short of glucose, this liver, again releases into the bloodstream. So again, it is looked after by the insulin. All this regulation of the glucose is done by the insulin. So that's how important insulin is. Suppose there is no insulin production right from the childhood, it happens in some children. So in that case, we call it as type 1 diabetes, which usually comes from the birth itself. So and it will be recognized a little later in the life because of certain symptoms. The doctor will diagnose it, and then it is labeled as type 1 diabetes, also sometimes called as juvenile diabetes. Juvenile means in the children it was found, that's why it is called as juvenile. But type 1 diabetes can occur in adults as well, where there is no sugar production. There is something wrong with the pancreas. Or pancreas, the cells which produce the insulin, they are inactive, dead or inactive. A person has got a pancreatic disease. In that case, the sugar may not be produced. In that case, a person can get type 1 diabetes. There is one type of diabetes. There is second type, which is called as type 2 diabetes, which has become very common, and which is usually seen in the later stages of life, but it's seen in young people as well these days because of the lifestyle. It's essentially a lifestyle disease. Here what happens is insulin is there, it's being secreted by the pancreas, but the problem is the utilization is not good. It is underutilized. The insulin does not process, it is ineffective in processing the carbohydrates or the glucose which is converted. So it's ineffective. In that case, it is called as type 2 diabetes. To manage type 2 diabetes, one requires more insulin than normal, more insulin. A doctor may prescribe insulin, as well as the doctor may prescribe certain medications. So one of the most prominent first line of medications is metformin. Then there are other types as well. So doctor may prescribe that so that the glucose utilization is better. It's managed, and the person, the diabetes comes down, and the person becomes normal. So that is called as type 2 diabetes. So, and doctors also may prescribe insulin in the form of injections. The person may have to take in case the sugar level is too much, glucose level is too much in the body. In that case, the person may be prescribed insulin injections, injectable insulins. The person may have to take it himself or herself before the meals. And also the insulins, these artificial insulins, chemically synthesized insulins, are available in various forms: fast acting, moderate acting, rapid acting, and also the inhalable type of insulin is available, which is quite fast acting. So this insulin also has as science has advanced. See, in the earlier days, we used to get only injectable insulin. These days we get a lot of other types of insulins for the faster action. So essentially, a person who is highly diabetic usually has to undergo this insulin therapy as well as medicines. If the diabetes is not too much, if the glucose level is not too much, in that case the person can take tablets, certain medications which the doctor has to prescribe. The doctor will decide what to do. So for this you have to go to the lab, and the doctor will prescribe certain lab tests, and the person comes to know. And these days even the glucometers are available, where the person can do the test at home itself. Usually the diabetics and the chronic diabetics, they usually buy this, because every other day they have to run to the laboratories to get the blood tested for the glucose, which is not required. They can get it tested at home itself. They themselves can do it, and occasionally they can have what is called as HbA1c test. I'll tell about that later. It's once in 3 months test. So I'll tell all about it a bit later in the next part of this particular episode. So this is all about insulin. So what I told you today, insulin is a necessary hormone, is a very, very necessary hormone, and it is produced by the pancreas, which is a gland, is an endocrine organ, which is situated just behind the stomach here, and which produces insulin as well as some other hormones also. It produces some minor hormones it produces for which aid in digestion. So main job of the insulin is to process the sugar and also to send the signals to the cells to absorb the sugar, and also send signals to liver and muscle fibers to store the excess glucose. So if there is no insulin, then the glucose is not utilized, it is circulating in the blood, it's very very bad for most of the organs. What happens I'll tell later in the next part of this particular episode called as diabetes. So today I have covered the important aspects of how one gets diabetes, what is insulin, and what happens if the production of insulin is not normal, or if it is production is normal but it is not utilized well properly because of some factors. So I told about that. So we'll meet again in the next part of the episode where I'll be telling more about diabetes, how to manage, what tests to do, and what happens if the sugar level shoots up beyond control, and what is the normal level. There is a perceived normal level and also what is a realistic normal level. I'll tell all about it later. So we'll meet again. Be there. Thank you. Please subscribe to my channel and also share my videos with your friends if you like it. Thank you very much. We'll meet again.